Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstead and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstead, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. We're here to talk Seahawks football and the 2025 NFL Combine. Doing a little preview for you today. Going to talk about prospects and all the different position groups, the schedule, what we're looking for, what the Seahawks will definitely be interested in, and just kind of some of the fun aspects of this week as far as just the sheer athleticism you get to see out on the field, and you get to kind of hear about John Schneider and potential deals that are out there for different players, specifically in the, quarterback market, which may shed some light on, the Seahawks situation. I think John Schneider will have a press conference either later today or tomorrow, I think, right? And you usually learn a little bit of information about what's going on in his head and with the group that they have. The nice thing this year is they're all kind of coordinated a little bit more this year with the coaching staff already set in place and so forth. So it should be fun. Keith, welcome in. Let's talk Seahawks football.
Yeah, last year the coaching staff wasn't there. It was just the Schneider and the front office staff. They were still trying to put together a coaching staff and get on the same page that way. So this year there's a lot more Seahawk personnel at the Combine, should lead to a more robust evaluation for the team coming out of this. But the thing to think about with this is the Combine is not the 40-yard dash. That might be what makes it onto ESPN and whatever, but it's a 6-day event. For each player, and the position groups rotate through, but they're there for 6 days. You got to come in. You have basically the weights and measurements where we find out hand size and arm length and all of that, followed by 2 days of medical stuff and interviews, and then finally they get into the workouts. And yeah, I mean, it's not just hey, they show up, they do the workout, they leave. This is a much bigger thing for the players and for the teams than the fans ever see. And honestly, yeah, we don't get any insight into what happens in those meetings and all of that. It's very rare that we actually hear about how a meeting goes. Everyone's always like, oh yeah, it went great. Okay, you can't have every single meeting go great. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of lays it out. It is an interesting process. They do all the on the field workouts and stuff on Thursday. I think over time, the utilitarian aspect of the Combine has given way to the primetime aspect of and the reality of football. And, you kind of have to remember that the NFL controls this event, controls the timing, all that kind of stuff. And when you watch the actual event and you look at the testing numbers and you realize that, only 3 of the linebacker group out of 25 did their agility testing, for example, because it's too late in the day. They've already done interviews, they've already done on the field workouts and so forth, and so they're not going to do the 3-cone, they're not going to do all those things, and it's a little disappointing. And I wish it would kind of get back to the basics a little bit, take it out of prime time. It's not meant for that anyway. Most Joe football fans are not really interested outside the 40-yard dash. People like you and I and others that follow the Combine stuff and the lead up to the draft and so forth find everything interesting. True. But most people don't. So, yeah, and I would imagine most people listening to the show in the off season are going to be in that that latter camp where, yeah, we do care. We're going to watch these things no matter what. But as far as
True.
team,
I was going to say that also, does it matter if you watch the guy run the 40 or do you just want to know what the time was when he's done? And I think there's a lot
once in a while, I'd like to watch it just because it's fascinating to watch a 280-pound defensive tackle dude, run a 4.65 40 or something like
that's
that.
Fair. Yeah.
I just want to see the fluid motion of a human being.
It's also sometimes entertaining to watch an offensive guard run a 5.8 second 40, but for a completely different reason. That's just, there's lumbering, and then there's some of these guards.
Yeah. So what I thought we would do is just kind of go through some different groups to kind of lay this out a bit as far as the type of players we're interested in watching, who we expect to kind of perform well, who's not performing, if we have notes that indicate that, and just kind of go through it that way, if that's possible.
Yeah, a couple things to mention right before we jump into players, because the other big thing that happens at the combine is there's owners meetings, which is usually when the first set of like rule changes stuff gets considered. There's also GM meetings because everyone's here, and so like the basics of the Russell Wilson trade were done at the combine that year, and so there is a lot of stuff that's has nothing to do with the college players that happens this week. Specifically, the Rams have given Stafford permission to seek a trade. So Stafford is in town to talk to teams.
It depends on the way you read that. It's more like they've given him permission to see what the market is and to, kind of establish a number and then kind of go back to the Rams and have the Rams work a contract deal out. I mean, to me, that's more of what that is, as opposed to he's seeking a trade and has been given permission to go find a trade partner. You'll have to go look and see exactly what was said there, but I think it leans the other direction.
He was given permission to talk to other teams and to possibly seek out a trade. Now, the other piece of news would come from the Seahawks and a not so ringing endorsement of Geno Smith by Mike McDonald, that basically somebody asked him if he thought Geno Smith was coming back, and his response was, well, I don't see any reason to say no, so I guess yeah. And I don't know about
Keith?
That was I just closed that window. It was a couple of days ago, and
on his radio show.
It was on the radio show. And then let's see.
This is the second year in a row. I mean, last year they got in trouble for saying, he's our quarterback until he's not. And now this year, this lack of ringing endorsement is just kind of weird. It's just a weird. You're so used to having John Schneider and Pete Carroll be kind of emphatically behind whoever was playing quarterback, and now it's kind of really loosey, and it's interesting.
Well, right after that, Geno Smith posted on X, formerly Twitter, with no caption, a clip of LeBron James getting mad and storming out of a press conference. So people are taking that to mean that he's pretty unhappy with that comment. So we'll see how all this goes. It's interesting, but some of that stuff does take place at the combine. They, if the Seahawks are going to be looking to, trade Geno and hope that they might actually get something from him, they're going to know this week. If they don't have any, any people like asking, they know that there's no trade out market for him, and he would have to be either cut or retained. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on this week.
Big portion of a guaranteed payment that he's due is due in March, early
March 16th. Yeah.
And so
10 million.
you're going to have something done ahead of time unless the Seahawks intentionally pay that to buy down a potential suitor and trade partner, which is possible, but
unlikely.
It's unlikely
because then they take that whole 10 million in a cap hit.
Yeah, and just it's like burning money, but we'll see. So all those things go on. So those are kind of interesting storylines that are kind of in the background, and you don't hear them directly, but we'll probably hear about some of that stuff. Let's talk prospects. I thought we'd just start with the quarterback group since we are talking about Geno Smith. This is a window of time, I think, that is open for the Seahawks to consider a replacement, a long-term replacement for Geno Smith. Geno Smith's going to be 35 years this year. He's okay. I think he's going to be pretty good in this new system, but he is that age, and you're starting to have to pay him now outsized contract numbers that don't align with exactly where he's at performance on the field. Now, if those things shoot up this year in this new system, and he looks like he's viable for another couple of years, I guess you can keep kicking the can down the road. But nonetheless, I think you have to really start to take seriously the consideration of selecting a quarterback in the draft, whether that's in the first round or the fourth round or the seventh round. You need to commit to at least trying to bring along a quarterback. And in an ideal situation, which I think this is, you bring in a quarterback, maybe it's a second round guy, maybe it's Jackson Dart or one of the other guys we'll talk about, to sit behind Geno for a year, learn from one of the best veterans out there, really, and the new coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball, and then be ready to go in 2026. What are your thoughts on that process?
I think if you draft a quarterback in the first round, the goal would be to play them. And so it is not, a situation where, they have to play on day one, but you're making the commitment that this is going to be your guy, and that you have to make an attempt to get them on the field, so they can learn and not have their rookie season just be a complete wash.
What did you think of the Michael Penix situation?
Well, Michael Penix situation was kind of dumb by Atlanta, and in the end, now they're going to have to figure out how to deal with like $70 million of guaranteed money to Kirk Cousins that he's never going to see from, or that they're going to have to pay, but they're never going to see anything back from him because he's going to be gone, and they're going to have Penix. But Penix was a guy that didn't sit his whole rookie year. He was able to come in, and Cousins got benched, and he was able to play.
Well, injury and benched,
yeah. And show that he belonged, and show that he was the guy that this team is going to look at going forward. So it really is it's kind of a dumb situation where they paid all of that money to Cousins and then turned around and used the 8th overall pick on a quarterback. It's like, do one, do the other, don't do both.
So at the top of this draft are a couple prospects, I think legit first round grades, or maybe you can just say Cam Ward has a first round grade, and then Shadur Sanders is peripheral, but and the same goes for like a guy like Jackson Dart. These guys are kind of peripheral first round grades. Now, if they were drafted in 2024, both Cam Ward and Sanders, I think, would have been the 5th, 6th options in that draft, and maybe have been pushed out of the first round talent wise. At least that's what I'm reading from a lot of different sources. I don't necessarily
agree with that. I would say that because you look at the players, the top 2 aren't really the top 3. Those were going to go where they went. But then after that, where do you see Penix with his age and injury history? Where do you see Bo Nix, and where do you see a guy that was so raw and unpolished with the guy that went to Minnesota? And so what you end up with, McCarthy, that's the name. And so where these guys fit in to there, I think you could see Ward fitting in ahead of any of those three guys. You could see Sanders getting looks in that same range because he is a guy that is such a high ceiling prospect. And so people are going to look at him and be like, yeah, you have to do that. But he's also got a lower floor. It's going to take some development time. So that might be possible that he drops down. I think that if those two guys were in the other draft, the guys that are really old, the Bo Nix and Michael Penix, would have seen their stock drop.
Yeah. Well, Todd McShay came out and basically said Cam Ward would be his QB number 5 in that draft. That's kind of what I'm basing it on. I don't know for my own eye. It's hard for me to kind of go back and put Cam Ward in that bucket. But nonetheless, this is 2025. This is this year. It looks like he's going to go either number 1 or number 2 overall. And then Sanders is going to be somewhere after that. There are rumors I'm starting to hear that Sanders could fall a little bit in this draft. Now, I don't know if he makes it all the way to 18, but if he does, Seattle would have to have a conversation about that, I would think. And then Jackson Dart, I think, comes into the combine with an opportunity to kind of potentially solidify his standing as being, at least in the conversation, to be a first round guy. Back end, whether it's 18 at Seattle, I think Seattle would like a player like Jackson Dart, or a drop back, maybe pick up a third round pick and select Jackson Dart with the 25th overall pick, something like that. That's possible. I mean, we have to start having these conversations, I think, about quarterback. We haven't had to for a long time, but I think it kind of becomes relevant this year.
Yeah, and I think that some people are going to be like, oh, just it's Gino's team and blah blah blah. But the team made a major effort to trade up to get Michael Penix Jr. a year ago. They were not committed to Geno Smith during the draft. They wanted to move up and they weren't able to. And Geno responded by being second in the NFL in interceptions and just not having a great year. Now, some of that's offensive line and all of that, but still, he did not have a good year. And so I can't see how they would be any less interested in finding a rookie quarterback this year than they would be next year. He's a year older. He's $15 million more expensive, and he's coming off a year in which he threw way too many interceptions. So, yeah, they're going to look. I mean, I think they're absolutely going to look. Cam Ward is going to turn some heads. He's big, and just the way he throws the ball and stuff. I think people are going to look at him and drool a little. And I think that's probably why he goes number 1 overall. Dart is more of a pocket passer, and so that there are teams that will look at that and be like, yeah, the NFL is going away from that. The players that I'm really interested in seeing run are Riley Leonard out of Notre Dame and Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. Milroe is known as a guy with an absolutely cannon of an arm, but accuracy problems, and mostly wins with his feet. And Riley Leonard, honestly, he's 2 inches taller and supposedly runs faster. And I really want to see what he does in terms of his movement ability, and can he show that he's a plus athlete on top of being able to throw the ball around? Because if he is, he's a guy that's going to jump up charts. So now,
while I'm interested in seeing those guys run, I'm interested in seeing those guys pass. Like Jalen Milrose got the reputation of having the small hands, the inaccuracy issue, all that kind of stuff. I think he can help himself. In fact, I would argue he might be one of the prospects in this entire combine that could help himself the most by having an outstanding passing workout at the combine. Now, Riley Leonard, absolutely. Like, he's an underrated guy, under the radar guy, total RPO upside with his ability to run the ball. Coordinators would love to work with him, I think. I think for me, he should be under Seattle's consideration, like in the third round. Like, I don't see him getting out of the fourth round at all, potentially out of the third round, especially after the combine. And I know that you've got all these combined big boards and so forth that say that he's a fifth round prospect and so forth. I just don't buy that. I think he's going to end up being in the third round at the latest, and could rise up even further than that by the time this process is all said and done.
Might consider him at 50.
Mm-hmm.
If he goes out, has a good combine, interviews really well, I could see the Seahawks being interested in him at 50 and not trying to wait until 82.
Do you think that the Seahawks are going to be in the Jackson Dart conversation based on his skill set and his fit and the scheme?
I think they will, because I think he is a guy that does kind of fit what they want.
He's a smart, tough football player. Probably the toughest quarterback in college football. Like, just really tough. Like, takes hits, initiates contact, just plays through a lot of stuff.
Yeah. He's a guy that, we've seen him get scared in clean pockets and try and run out of a pocket he doesn't need to. We've seen him, do things where he holds onto the ball too long and doesn't, feel the pressure coming. You see that in all the quarterbacks, but there's a little bit enough in there that's concerning, especially because Ole Miss's passing attack is very much a Mike Holmgren style timing and rhythm passing attack where it's just a different thing. And when he's on schedule and in rhythm, he's really good. But when things break down, if the throw that he wanted pre-snap isn't there and he has to pull the ball down and maybe move from his spot in order to buy time, it's not as good. His tape isn't. And so I think that there are I think there's going to be, concerns with him. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 quarterback. But so, yeah, if the Seahawks can drop down off of 18 and pick up another third round pick, and then have him still be there at, 25, they will definitely consider that, because inside all of what I just said is a guy that has considerable arm talent and will do really well in, this offense with all the bootlegs and kind of things that are done in an effort to get guys open and scheme them open. And so I think that he'll be fine.
You opened your conversation with the idea that if you're going to pick a quarterback in the first round, the idea is that you're going to play him right away. I think that Seattle may pass on a quarterback like that. Now, I wouldn't mind the pick, but they may elect to wait a little bit, prioritize a different position group early on, and then select a player like Riley Leonard or Will Howard or Kyle McCord or Curtis Rourke, even Tyler Shug could be a guy that they would look at, I think, maybe. Just a guy that they could sit in the offense behind for the year, no pressure, learn the system and be ready to go the following year. That seems like a more likely course of action, but we haven't been through free agency yet, and the Geno Smith stuff that could change everything.
Yeah. I mean, if they move on from Geno, then they become a team that you have to start thinking quarterback at 18, maybe even trading up. If they work out a deal with Geno to lower his cap number and keep him in town, then yeah, you're not spending a first round pick on a guy that you're hoping doesn't play, because that means Geno's playing well. And so, yeah, then you're going to wait and go get a Riley Leonard, or wait even further and maybe even a Donovan Smith out of Houston, and just go pick a guy that you know needs development, but the physical tools are just too good to pass up.
I think that the guy that exemplifies exactly what you just said in this draft is Curtis Rourke, the quarterback out of Indiana, one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the draft, according to all the advanced metrics. If there's a QBX scheme fit quarterback here beyond Jackson Dart, it's Rourke. But he had the ACL, so he played through an ACL tear during the season, and then had corrective surgery the first part of January. So don't know exactly what that surgery entailed, if it was a full repair, if it was just kind of a half tear or something like that. I don't know what his status is going to be. But that's okay with a quarterback like that, a guy that you could essentially sit on in a redshirt season for a little bit, and he would still be involved in all the practices and quarterback room stuff, and learn, all of the intricacies of the job, but just not be available on game days. That could be an option. And I'm interested to see how he interviews and so forth. He's going to go through the interview process. He's not going to be able to do things on the field. I know that another guy like Sanders is not going to perform at the combine. He's going to wait for his pro day. It'll be interesting to see if there's anybody else that does that. So
yeah,
if you
typically there's a lot of guys that think they're near the top of the draft that don't participate in drills here. The idea being that they can only hurt themselves. They can't help themselves. They're already viewed as being, a first round pick. So, which is one of the problems that the combine has if you're trying to turn it into a viewing, like an audience enabled thing. So, right. I don't know if if you're going to take a developmental quarterback, I still would think Donovan Smith or Rourke. I think he's got a much higher ceiling, but that's just me. He's also
let's talk running backs.
Okay.
There's a lot of running backs. There's a lot of running backs in this class, and I'm kind of excited to see a bunch of them. Ollie Gordon, you've mocked him before. Omaron Hampton out of North Carolina. I mean, that would be a great pick for me. But you'd have to take him probably early second round. I don't think he's going to even be there until the 50th pick. Travion Henderson, Caleb Johnson. These are the guys that I want to see run, because Caleb Johnson is 225 pounds. If he runs in the 4.4s, you know what? Just go draft the dude. At that size and that speed, you just he's going to run people over. He's going to be like Derrick Henry. But he does have the skill set too, right?
Mullings out of Michigan is a little slower, but 233. I'd love to see him, run, in the mid 4.5s. Devin Neal out of Kansas at 220. If he can run, in the 4.4s, low 4.4s, these are guys that it's just they're so big that they are interesting. And it's if they run well, man, that's just interesting. Now, if they go out and run poorly, if, Caleb Johnson goes out and runs a 4.6, he's not going to be the third running back on the, in the draft again. He'll drop to 5 or 6 because that teams just won't view that speed as being enough to get the job done.
So there's a couple of running backs that are going to blow it out of the water as far as running in speed. It's Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee and Bashul Tootin out of Virginia Tech. Tootin's supposedly run a 4.3 240 at some point.
Wow.
And Sampson's right behind him there. He could be the most explosive back when you factor in
He's only
standing,
191 pounds,
long
though.
jump and vertical. Yeah. I really want to see the difference. And I'd mentioned this when we were doing our mock before between Phil Maffa and Damian Martinez, a couple of good sized backs with some speed. But one's a little bit more physical and the other one's a little bit more nuanced. Damian Martinez on film looks the part, but when he doesn't really initiate contact very much. He kind of sidesteps things, gets out of bounds. Phil Maffa is the opposite. He kind of runs into people. And so I kind of want to see how they look in person. That's really interesting to me. Scatabo is another guy that it'd be so easy to root for a guy like that.
Yeah.
How about the wide receiver room, Keith?
So the wide
Seahawks seem
receiver
like they're going
room,
to be in the market.
yeah, they do. They definitely see like they're going to be in the market for a wide receiver, and it kind of depends on what they're looking for. And you know, there's a lot of different guys though. I'm interested in Matthew Golden out of Texas, who's 6 foot and runs 4.38. I think if he jumps and has a great agility things, he's going to climb and be a guy that a lot of people are looking at. And maybe Tez Johnson out of Oregon, who's only 5'9", but has just crazy elite speed, long speed. And so an opportunity for him to come in and show that off, also show off some good agility stuff so that teams will look at him and be like, okay, he's more than just a punt returner, which is kind of how he's viewed now because he's only like 160 pounds. So there's definitely some interesting things. Probably the person I'm wanting to see most here, though, is Jalen Royals. He's a guy that runs, just under 6 foot, 5'11", runs sub 4.4, and just he doesn't look like a guy that's like skinny and he's gonna have knee problems. He's 210. He's built more like a running back, but moves like a wide receiver. If he can come in and blow that out the way in terms of his running and stuff, I think he's going to be really interesting come draft day.
I like his upside. I like Ilek Ayomanor out of Stanford, 6'2", 210 pounds, 4'4", 240. Arian Smith, I want to see that kid run from Georgia. He's supposed to be he will walk away from the combine with the fastest 40 time. It's just a matter of how much.
You
reporting from
not,
Feldman
not Isaiah Bond
says that he could be in the low 4.2s. Arian Smith.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isaiah Bond's supposed to be in that
Bond's
range
a guy,
too.
Man. Yeah, Bond can, but I think Bond's more of a 4.3 guy. Not that that's going to be bad.
He's only a 4.3 guy.
Right?
Yeah.
Kyle Williams. I want to see Kyle Williams, like the Washington State kid. When you watch his tape, Keith, he's a receiver. Like he does things well. He's undersized, but he's also underrated. Probably one of the best deep ball threats in the class. And I think that if he runs worse than a 4.35, I think I would be surprised. And there's a spot for a guy like that in the NFL. Is he going to get drafted before round 3? No, but after that, I think somebody's probably going to take a shot on him. That'd be interesting. The other guy I want to see is Savion Williams from TCU, 6'5", 225 pounds. Bruce Feldman's got him as a 10.6 broad jump and a 40-inch vertical, and he's been clocked as fast as 22.5 miles per hour on the football field, but I don't have a 40 time, so I want to see kind of how that matches up, because that could be a good option for Seattle in the middle rounds.
Tall and got some speed.
Yeah.
Well, in the same mold would be Torrey Horton out of Colorado State, who's 6'3", only 185, so he's like much skinnier, but runs about the same. Has looks like he's gonna jump out of the gym and stuff. So having him like as another option if Williams is already off the board, and you're looking for a tall speedster, that's another way to go.
Yeah, I think if Seattle was going to look in the second round, it'd be the kid from Stanford and Jack Besh from TCU. I think that's the prototypical kind of player that Seattle would like to have, a good blocking wide receiver, a guy that's not afraid to get out on the outside edge and seal those edges for the running backs to come around. And I think he'd be a good player, not just a good wide receiver, just a good football player. This draft is really interesting for me as far as just the depth, the overall depth of players. It's not heavy at the top, but man, there's just a bunch of guys that can make your football team better between rounds 2 and 5. And the tight end group is really kind of epitomizes that. Yeah, you can go get your Aurora in the second round, but also you might be better off getting a guy like Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame in the 4th or 5th round, maybe the 4th. The guy that can just do it all. And I think that's kind of what Seattle's probably in the market for. I don't know that they'll necessarily go out and get a receiving tight end or prioritize that, but I bet you, considering Kubiak's statement that if we have a tight end, he better block, that it'd be more likely to be a guy like Evans or Ferguson or Jackson Haas or Gunnar Helm, for example.
Yeah, not Aronde Gadsden out of Syracuse, who's looked at more as like maybe just a really big slot receiver than a blocker. So yeah, I mean, this is the Seahawks need a tight end. They have one, maybe two, if they can figure out a contract thing with Fant to keep him around. But that's it. There's not any depth position. There really isn't any like futures contract people that are super interesting. They're going to go get a tight end, and if Fant ends up gone, they're going to definitely need one in this draft. And but I don't think they're going to be taking one early. This team has too many needs. Even before you include quarterback as a potential, draft priority. They've got too many needs on the offensive line and cornerback and some of these other positions that are just more valuable to your franchise in terms of wins than tight ends. I don't see them going tight end early. And that's why a guy like Mitchell Evans really makes sense to me, because that's like a 4th round pick, probably.
Yeah. We talked about him when we talked about that tight end group just a few weeks or last week, and being like a really good fit, like a system fit. And sometimes guys that are in that range, they're in that range for different reasons. And sometimes they're just overlooked a little bit. And I think he's one of them.
Yep.
So
Lachey, out of Iowa too. Is another guy that I think the team will be interested, because you're not, you can't take the 1st round pick, option for each position group. You've only got one of those. And so, yeah, you're going to have to find value later in the draft, and tight end's one that I think you can easily do that. And that's why I'm thinking they're going that way.
So the crazy thing about the offensive line group, Keith, overall, is that it wouldn't shock me if Seattle waits until the 3rd or 4th round before they pick their first offensive lineman in this draft. Now, do I think that's going to happen, or do I wish that was true? Not necessarily. But when you take a look at the scheme, you're not necessarily looking for the prototypical kind of lineman that you would normally look for. You're looking for that lighter, more athletic guys that you can find in round 3, 4, 5, guys that have the short shuttle and the 10-yard splits that are, in the 174, 176 range, and the short shuttles in the 4-5 range. Those guys are going to end up being the guys that start on this offensive line, I think, in the future, if the Kubiak stuff sticks around for a while. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, that was definitely true in the early days of the zone stretch style running games, where, Denver had all those years of, just dominating the league with guys that were in their 290s. But over the years, you saw Kubiak led teams start drafting bigger offensive linemen as long as they could still move. So you want guys that can move really well. And if you have to get a guy that's 305 in order to get a guy that can move good enough, then you do. But if you can find a guy that's 330 and moves just as well, you're going to go get the guy that's 330. And so I just think that you're starting to see how the guys that are that size are showing more athleticism now than they did 10 years ago, and that's why I think you're going to see the guys get bigger. And I don't think they're going to be looking for going too small. But yeah, they're not. Don't look at a guy that is 340 pounds and is just a massive dude that just pushes on, leans on people.
5'3". Yeah.
Yeah. Jonathan Salanea comes to mind from Arizona, where 340 pounds, but he's a monster of a guy just pushing people back, but he doesn't really have lateral agility and the ability to move well enough to work in this scheme. So guys like that, I think, are guys that the Seahawks would pass on.
Although they've met with him twice, which is interesting to me, given that information.
True. They met with him twice at the Senior Bowl. So, and maybe that's one of those things, is that maybe the way I view him based on what his college tape, maybe the Seahawks don't view him that way, and they say, hey, look, there's more here than he showed. And that's why the combine's here, because we'll know when he shows up at the combine and shows, and runs a 3-cone in the mid 7.5s. Right then, okay, yeah, sign me up. But if he goes out there and runs a 9-second 3-cone, then he's a guy that will work great in a phone booth and not in space. So, just kind of, those are the kind of evaluations and why the combine exists.
Yeah, I think a guy like Armand Membu is going to be a guy that I'm going to watch, because I think that he could potentially be the 18th overall pick.
Yeah.
And if Seattle wasn't going to go offensive line and he was there, it'd be awfully hard to pass on him, because he'd be an ideal guy to bring into this offense. You could put him into guard. He could play tackle for you. He played tackle very well in college. He's got the length, but it's right on the fringe where he looks like he might do a little better on the inside, Keith. And I guess you'd have to do some advanced work on scouting and trying to figure out exactly what he's going to be best at. But that's a guy that I'm going to be looking at in this combine, just to see how he moves and some of that speed. He's going to run a 4.9 40, which is great for this size. He's 330 pounds. Luke Kandra from Cincinnati is going to test really well. There's a few others. Donovan Jackson, I'm interested in seeing. He's kind of a middle of the road, vanilla butter on toast kind of a player for me, but sometimes that's what you need. Like, you just need like the guarantee player to kind of come in and hold it down for 6-8 years. And he'd be a player that I think they could probably do that. Connor Colby in the middle rounds, I think, is an interesting prospect. That's kind of a stretch zone type of player. There's a few others. I'm really interested in Seth McLaughlin, although he's not going to be able to test because he had a ruptured Achilles. And I don't know exactly what the timing is with him, but he's a player that I wouldn't mind Seattle drafting in the 5th, 6th round just to get on the roster and kind of redshirt him for the year.
Yeah, you take him and basically you're drafting him to stash him, knowing that you'll use a 5th round pick on him, but you're going to get a 2nd round talent. You just have to wait a year.
Mm-hmm.
And
Gray Zabel, Jared Wilson, those players. Yeah. Yep. Oh, I want to see him. I want to see him at the combine.
I'm interested in Jared Wilson, the center out of Georgia, because his athleticism, I think, is going to show up, and a center that's that athletic, and the ability to move, to pull, to just do those kind of things, that's going to be really interesting to me, because that's, basically he's a bigger and stronger Oluwatimi.
He's 6'3",
And
310. He runs a 4.8 40, and his agility is
yeah,
supposed to be off the charts. So I
yeah.
think you get the agility and the athleticism plus the IQ and the scheme fit for a zone heavy team. Jared Wilson could be the pick, and like, I'm not going to say it's going to be at 50, but if he was sitting there at 82, that'd be a fine pick.
Oh, if he's there at 82 and they don't pick him, that's going to be one of those like, seriously, again?
So let's switch it over to the defense and kind of round this thing out. The edge rushers and the defensive ends and the defensive tackle group at the combine and in this draft in general are a great, talented group. If you need one of those players in this draft, you're going to get a good player. And I think Seattle definitely drafts one. I mean, Seattle has taken a defensive lineman with one of their first 2 picks in 8 out of the last 10 drafts. And in 2023, they took edge rusher Derek Hall with their 3rd pick overall. They had 2 picks in the 2nd round. So that's 9 picks in out of 11 in the last 10 drafts. And so they're definitely going to take a defensive lineman. Who do you have your eye
on? Thinking about like a, a 2nd round pick, a guy like Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, who at 342, I want to see how he runs and whether he's athletic
he's
enough
to good. He's
whether
he good.
Whether he offers enough athleticism to make you think that he's more than just a 2-down nose tackle. I think he's going to.
I think he's not going to be around in the 2nd round. I'm not sure what you're thinking.
Damn.
I think he's going to be a back end of the 1st round guy.
Yeah. And then after that, like, there's, I haven't really put much energy into edge rushers because I just think Seattle has bigger needs. And so there are guys that are down further in the draft, that I like, but they're not as good as the guys. There's guys that I would rather talk about, but I just don't think that Seattle targets them. And so it ends up putting me in a weird spot of all of that. I am looking forward to Deion Walker, who's 6'7", 340. But I think he's probably more of a 2-down nose tackle, but I want to see what he does. Give me, go show me. Because he's a guy that I think could be really fun, to plug in the middle of that defense, especially like on, on definite running downs, short yardage, goal line, that kind of stuff. But if he offers you more than that, if there's any explosiveness, for him to possibly be, a guy that you could leave in there on passing downs and get something out, his ability to push the pocket and, not let the quarterback step up, then damn, that's just going to get more and more interesting. So yeah, he's a guy that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I think, at the top of the draft, you're looking at Walter Nolan out of Mississippi. He's fun. Norman Lott, the bigger guy in the middle from Tennessee, probably a 2nd round prospect. Oladejo from UCLA, I like as a bigger defensive end, kind of a edge setting kind of a guy. James Pierce in the same mold, but James Pierce gives you a little bit more upside on getting to the quarterback as well. And if he's sitting there at 18, that's certainly going to be a possibility. Jordan Phillips, the defensive tackle from Maryland, is interesting. Ty Robinson.
What do you think about Jordan Birch out of Oregon?
Yeah, I like the way Jordan Birch moves, and this is going to be an interesting combine for him. I think that you get kind of shut down a little bit when you're playing on the West Coast. I know he was at Oregon. I know they were a national championship caliber team, but a guy like that could definitely be a riser if he performs well at the combine. I don't know about a fit in Seattle.
Because at 295, he's pretty much he's a 5 tech. He's a 5 tech who's gonna move well, and I think he's gonna test well. But he didn't have the pass rush production that the people are thinking of. But he's also,
he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school too. He was a big time player, and it's never really completely came together for him. Doesn't mean it won't.
Didn't. But 295 for a 5 tech defensive end, God, I would be very interested.
You'd have to be able to move. You'd have to be able to move him around too. In Mike McDonald's defense, he'd have to pay some 3-tech and all that kind of stuff. We'll see. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. How about Brady Swinson? Swinson to me is another prospect that's sitting out there, fringy third, second round grade, could drop even a little further. He could be a guy that would be on Seattle's radar. CJ West, defensive tackle, Indiana, maybe. Linebackers, Keith. There's some guys like Jihad Campbell from Alabama is a guy. Now, would Seattle go out and spend? No, because they've already got a couple guys, especially if they can get Jones back. Now, if he's gone, then you maybe take a look at investing a higher draft pick in a linebacker. I don't think it's going to happen this year. So I'd be looking more like Jay Higgins from Iowa or a Jack Kaiser, Notre Dame. Demetrius Knight is the perfect fit for me, but I think he's going to go earlier than I think Seattle has a pick at 82. I think he's goes somewhere between 50 and 82. And if Seattle doesn't move around a little bit, I think they're going to miss the opportunity to get him. But Cody Lindenberg out of Minnesota is a kind of a fallback option in a later round, mid to later round, 4th, 5th round pick. I think he's going to run really well at 240 pounds. And he's capable of like a 4.0 short shuttle. And that's going to really put him on the radar, I think, for Seattle.
Yeah. When looking at this, I mean, you gotta think that, what Seattle's looking for, middle linebacker prospects, right? Because just the way that their scheme works, like it's inside linebacker in a 3-4. And so some of these guys, just, they don't have the size to hold up in there. Guys like, Jeffrey Bossa from Oregon. I don't think he's going to hold up
he's a
in
tweener.
there where, he's a guy that fits more as a weak side linebacker in a 4-3.
It's true.
But Danny, Stutzman, got to make sure I say that right, out of Oklahoma, 241 pounds, 6'4", maybe doesn't run, as fast as, you'd kind of like running a, 4.6, but he's a guy that comes downhill really well, and meets running backs in the hole. And you got to have those tackling machines, those guys that come downhill and are able to. I
like Chris Paul for that. Chris Paul Jr. out of Mississippi.
Yeah. I mean, that was the kind of guys that this team's going to need. Kobe King out of Penn is another guy that kind of fits that mold. Just guys that come downhill and make tackles. And so if you can find that,
I'll give you that, but we got to switch position groups. Let's switch over to safety and talk about Nick Manowari out of South Carolina. Bruce Feldman, dude, says that he's going to put up an 11.4 broad jump, a 42-inch vertical, and a 4.35 40 at 220 pounds. I want that, Keith. I want that on my team.
6'3", 227 with that athleticism and a sub 4.4 40. Can
you imagine?
Honestly,
like
you want an elite safety that's going to come in and change your defense and just be like the way Cam Chancellor changed Seattle's defense back in the day, or the way Hamilton changed Baltimore's defense. When McDonald was, in Baltimore, like he is that kind of guy. And honestly,
Jeremy Chin on steroids.
Yeah. I think if you're going to go that route, then you're probably going in, late round 1.
I agree.
And for a safety, that's pretty high, but
it's high. It's so high, but the safety, a good down line, a good strong safety combined with a really good linebacker is so important in Mike McDonald's defense. And that was proved out last year and proved out in Baltimore. And I just think that could potentially be the best pick in the draft when it's all said and done.
He's one of my favorite players in this draft. Just absolutely love his game.
It's a luxury pick, unfortunately, I think, for Seattle, because the offensive line situation, well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you got the quarterback, the offensive line. We're talking about a wide receiver need with Tyler Lockett being gone. I hate to draft for need, and maybe we address all these things in free agency so the draft just kind of flows, and that's the goal, right? But you're right. He's kind of in that tweener spot where Seattle doesn't have a pick. You're not going to overdraft him at 18 unless he just completely knocks their socks off. Now, if that's the case and he rises up to 18 and they stick and pick, there's something special about this kid, and I'm going to be there for it. But
yeah.
if they can trade back and maybe even a couple times pick up a third and a fourth round pick or a fifth, and you get this guy at the back end of the first round, then you let the rest of the draft kind of come to you. But you got the guy that's going to change your defense. Why wouldn't you pick a guy that's going to tilt the field for you and change your defense?
Yeah. McDonald wants to have the number one defense in the NFL. And they had, for the last 8 games, they were like the number 3 defense, which they were really good. But this guy just gives them an instant upgrade at the position that they probably need it most, because the one weakness that, kind of had is Julian Love played really well when he got moved to strong safety, but he doesn't play really physical in that role. He's best, as that free safety and a guy that can rotate around and do lots of things for you. He isn't that big physical presence. And they could have used that. And Jenkins was supposed to be that, but he was just never really lived up to, any hype that he might have had. And so this would just be a huge upgrade there. His ability to come in and just with that speed and everything, you could use him in so many different ways. And I just think that it just is another impact guy. The way Jones was in the middle, the way Leonard Williams was up front. Now you add Inamari to go with Spoon on the back end. I would have a hard time if they move back. They move back to 25 and he's sitting there. I would have a hard time passing on him. I think he's going to be special.
If they stay true to their board and he's their best player, available, which could happen. You never know. I mean, if they miss out on that, you've got Andrew Mukuba, from Texas in the later rounds, Lathan Ransom from Ohio State, Jalen Reed from Penn State. A lot of guys like to hit in this draft. Darian Porter, if you're going to go cornerback, similar to a bigger guy that runs fast for 4.26, 4.30 type speed with what's our cornerback's name that's 6'2" and
Woolen.
Woolen, kind of in that Woolen mode. I lost my train of thought there for a second. But there's some nice corners, nice safeties in this draft. I think the safety group is intriguing for me. I don't know if Seattle's going to expend a pick there. Jenkins is going to stick around or not. I think the room could always use some new talent. I think the corner room is malleable as far as Reek Woolen's status. And then behind that, what do we really have, on the outsides? And so I do see us drafting a defensive back. I just don't know where or what it's going to be.
Yeah. I expect them to draft a corner, actually, just because what we saw last year, that the corner depth looked really good in camp, and then they traded Mike Jackson, and then everyone got hurt, and the corner depth was fairly poor. And really, Josh Jobe kind of developed from an undrafted guy into a good player and kind of saved that room, because otherwise, the lack of depth was just going to hurt. And so I'm interested in guys, Darian Porter, out of Iowa State at 6'2" and runs well. I think he could be really interesting. in like the third round. If you go down below that, maybe Billy Bowman out of Oklahoma. He's a little shorter at 5'10", but man, that guy's got wheels. And showed elite like ball skills. He's kind of a ball hawk, but he's not that big. But maybe he's a guy that you can use kind of like you use Spoon, and have him work in the slot some of the time and outside.
Yeah, he's going to be more of a free safety
around.
too, so you can move him around a little bit for sure.
So, yeah, there's some interesting guys in this draft. I expect them to draft at least one defensive back, probably two, probably one corner and one safety, just because you got to plan for, Jenkins, even if he sticks around, he's in the last year of his deal and he's heading out. And so you got to kind of plan ahead of that. And like I said, they just need corner depth.
Yeah. I want to see how Will Johnson from Michigan tests. I understand that he's going to run well and do agility really well. Malaki Moore out of Alabama. Darian Porter, you mentioned, and Siobhan Ravel, East Carolina. Sanker from Virginia, later, like 6th, 7th round. Jalen Smith, same. Malaki Starks, again, Georgia. Azare Thomas is a corner prospect that you're going to have to spend probably a late first or early second round to get into that. Xavier Watts, Notre Dame, I like him. Kevin Winston, Penn State, another safety prospect. So there's a lot of guys. The draft is just kind of full of prospects, as it always is. And after the combine, you just kind of have a better idea where players kind of slot in the draft. It kind of solidifies that a little bit more. So it's just another data point for us to be able to talk about and identify players. That's it. That's the deal. Workouts start on Thursday, Keith. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You gonna be watching?
I'll be watching some. I won't be watching all day. I just have other things going on. But yeah, I'll be watching some. Just tune in, kind of get an idea of who's doing well, who's not showing well, if there's any other drama going on, and all that kind of stuff. Really, I'm interested in Schneider's press conference, and to see what we hear about any potential movement on Ernest Jones and contract restructures for the guys that need contract restructures and all of that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I used to watch a little bit more than I do now. I usually look for measurements and all that kind of stuff, key data points on agility. And then I'll go back and watch different performances that I missed that I really want to see. It's a long day times 4. And so you just kind of have to pick and choose your position groups, or convenience wise, if it works out. But fun event for everyone. So check it out. That's it. I think we come back afterwards. Maybe we'll do a recap. I think we're getting back into our position groups as well. And we're up to the offensive tackle group, and then we switch to the defense after that. And then we start talking about free agency in rapid fire. They just keep coming. So anything else, Keith?
No, let's go ahead and let's go watch this. Hopefully there's going to be some Seattle news soon about getting under the salary cap finally. I doubt they're going to wait until the last second.
Need to happen here in the next 2 weeks. It's going to be very active. I mean, they'll probably end up generating at least $45 to $50 million before the first day of free agency. And we'll see what that looks like. We've talked about all the different scenarios that could entail, but it'll be very interesting how they approach that for sure. All right. Find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk, the show is Seahawks Playbook podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and our YouTube channel. And when you find it, hit that subscribe button. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.